All right. See that? That's a door. We're going to change that door in this episode. I know it's not that exciting, but it is part of the studio, and I'm doing it for two reasons. The first reason, as I discussed previously in other episodes, is that this is the first time I actually have somewhat of, I guess I'll call this a live room, this little foyer here, that is going to be separated from my control room with a door here. And I already did some testing, and even the door as is without any soundproofing, it does a halfway decent job of me being able to monitor in this room. However, it could be better. And the second reason is if there is someone downstairs who is living with me and I am mixing music, maybe even practicing on the guitar amp. I don't think this is going to work with the drums, but maybe practicing on the guitar amp. I want to be able to isolate the sound in this room as much as possible so I don't annoy someone who, say, is, watching TV down there in the living room. So the first thing I did was, or I'm going to do, is I'm going to replace this door, which is a hollow door with barely any weight, with a solid core door that is right here. I just picked this up. Of course, my local Home Depot didn't have it, so I had to drive to Staten Island and pay $20 in tolls. But regardless, right now it's upside down. But this is a solid core door. And if you noticed, there is no hole for the handle, and there is no depressions here for the hinges. So I'm going to have to, drill the hole, where is the, here it is. Drill the hole, not a big deal. That'll be rather easy. The more annoying part is going to be chiseling out the indentations for the hinges, because if you look at these hinges here on a door, the hinge is recessed inside the door, right? It's flush on the outside, so I'm going to have to cut out a recess for these hinges. Not a big deal. A little bit of woodworking never stopped me. But this solid core door has a lot more weight to it, and it should help in isolating the sound. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. The second thing is I'll show you with this door. You can see, if I turn off the light, that there is a pretty big gap underneath that door. So I bought what they call a door sweep. And whenever you see air, right, from underneath the door, that's going to be a great spot for sound to want to leak out. So I bought this, they call it a door sweep. Let's see if I can take it out. And of course, the ones they had in the store were all broken, so I bought the least broken one. Thankfully, I was able to get a $7 discount on this. So you can see it's broken. It's broken here, and this piece is starting to come off. But my door is only like this long, so this piece will be gone. No big deal. This piece I'm just going to cut off with a scissor and whatever. It'll be good enough. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is I bought some weather stripping foam here that I'm going to put in the jam. I'll show you. Well, I guess let me turn off this light again, and I'll show you. See all that light? Oh, look at up there. There's a lot of light coming from up there. Well, anytime you see light like that from a door, that's where the sound is mostly coming from. So I have to seal that as best as I can around all four edges of the door with this rubber and vinyl weather stripping. And it should help a lot. And in reality, I should probably do a before and after test. All right, I'll do like a poor man's before and after test. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm just going to set this camera outside and play something that I could play back after I make all these changes with the same volume, and see how much improvement there is.
And your favorite narrator, Mario, is back. And I know you guys don't watch this video for woodworking, but I never hung a door slab before, so I figured it might be interesting to kind of video it and just walk you through my process. And, in the spirit of this channel, I'm going to keep it as analog as possible. Hand tools only, baby. Okay, so we got all of the handle hardware off. Now it is time to lug this bad boy down into my basement, and it's always a pain to move this stuff by yourself. The hollow door is really not heavy at all. It's very easy to move around. But that solid core door is considerably more heavy. I mean, it's not too heavy to carry, but, just kind of hard to maneuver, especially in my small garage. So right now, I am putting the old door on top of the new door, and I'm going to line them up perfectly and put some clamps on it so I know the alignment is not going to be moved around. And to drill the hole, to get the right position of that door handle hole, I'm just simply going to drill through that existing hole with a hole saw that I showed earlier in the video. So that part was actually really easy, didn't really take much thought. I did put a sacrificial piece of wood below the hole to be drilled, just so when I got to the other side of the new door, it didn't blow through it. Now I'm just transferring some lines to get ready to drill out the recess for the locking mechanism, whatever that piece is called. You see I'm using a pair of dial calipers here to make sure the center of that hole is perfectly aligned in the center. I'm center punching it with this awl, and we're going to use a bracing bit. And any chance I get to use a bracing bit, I take it. As fun as this thing looks, it is as fun to use it in real life. It's actually more difficult than you would think, but regardless, it's still fun to use. The hole is going to be the easy part. The harder part is going to be doing the recess for the plate here, the locking plate. I don't know the correct name, but you see me here tracing it with my pencil, and then I'm going to use a chisel and a router plane to get the recess. So you can see there's the transfer right there with the pencil. I'm going to get out a chisel, put the chisel on the pencil lines, and now I'm just going to hit it with the palm of my hand just to get, a small indentation. You don't want to go too crazy. You don't want to just whack a piece of wood right away with the chisel, because you want to establish your initial wall first. And if you know anything about hand tool woodworking, you probably know who Paul Sellers is. I've learned everything from Paul Sellers. That guy is the best jabroni out there, okay? So I'm taking various size chisels. You can see this is probably a 1/2-inch chisel on the sides here. The other sides I was using like an inch chisel. And then for the corner radiuses, you're going to see me get out a 1/8-inch chisel and just, once again, use my hands to kind of put some pressure in there and start that chisel edge. Here is the 1/8-inch chisel, and, that's my least used chisel, but in circumstances like this, it really comes in use. And like I say all the time, across your various hobbies, there's going to be a lot of similarities, and just to pull some similarities between hand tool woodworking and analog recording, it's going to take more work, it's going to take more time. However, I think the end product and the journey to get there is so rewarding that it far outweighs any of the, convenience you get with, say, electric tools when you're doing woodworking. So you can see me here finally using a mallet once I get a wall established. And you see, look at this edge. If you zoom in real close, you will see the edge of the door start to budge out. Let's see if we can get that on camera again. And you're going to see in a second why I'm pointing this out. But you see when I hit the chisel, you see how that wood starts to bulge out? If I'm not careful, that would have chipped off and I would have ruined this whole door. And obviously that wouldn't have been ideal. So now I get out this piece of wood to use as a brace against that edge of the wood. This way, when I do a chiseling, it's not going to break off. Now, this is my favorite tool, a hand plane router. This is such a fun tool. Here I am setting the depth of the tool so that it matches the recess that I'm on the old door. So when I route out the recess on the new door, it's going to match the same depth. And if you're curious, the door I bought was $70. If I would have bought one that came with the holes already drilled out and all the recesses already recessed and the hinges on, it would have cost me $190, I believe. So I saved basically $120. Well, minus $20 to get it to Staten Island. So it saved me about $100. But here you could see me using this hand plane router. And as you can see, there's just basically a chisel attached to it that stays at a very specific depth, and you incrementally adjust the depth. So now I'm going back to the chisel, going back to my lines, hitting it a little harder, getting that edge farther down into the wood. And then once I'm done doing that, I'm going to go back with the hand plane router. And you have to go through this process a few times, especially if you're, chiseling out a deep hole. It could take you an hour, right? Depending on how many times you have to do it. And you're just going back and forth between the chisel, the hand plane router, chisel, hand plane router. I'm just going to skip ahead because I don't think you guys want to see the whole process. But once again, here's the 1/8-inch chisel. I love this thing. I bought this chisel set for maybe $40, and it has done me good since high school. It is a rather cheap set of woodworking chisels, but it's such a step up from anything that you could get from Home Depot or Lowe's or anything like that. So, I don't know. I like talking about tools. Hopefully I'm not boring you guys. I'm going to bring out the hand plane router again in a second. Here it is. See, now I unlock it, turn that screw, which makes that chisel piece go down a little farther than wood, and now I'm able to go a little bit deeper. And I don't know if it looks satisfying to you, but to use this tool, it is so satisfying. The brand of hand plane router I'm using on camera is a Veritas, which is actually kind of an expensive one. I remember I asked my mom to get this for me one year for Christmas in high school, and this is one of those tools that, like, if you don't have it, man, it just makes your life so much easier when you have the correct tool for the correct task. You know, there's plenty of tools in the audio recording realm that without it, you know, it's just impossible. Like a compressor is just such a specific tool that makes your life so much easier that once you get it, you know, it makes your life so much easier, right? Now I got to the specified depth. Now I'm just going in with the knife, just getting all the pieces of wood and frayed ends that are in the corner of that hole, you know, just getting it out of there, cutting it away. And then once I'm done with this knife, I'm going to plop that plate in there and we're going to see what it looks like. Here we go, putting that piece in, see if it fits, and bam, first try. I mean, that's snug. That was a perfect fit. I am extremely happy with how that turned out. Now, I have to do the recesses for the hinges, and this actually turns out to be a little more difficult. Here you see me struggling, just trying to move this slab in my garage. It's filled with TVs and bookcases and other pieces of wood, but I make it work. I think I start dancing in a second. I don't know what that was about. Let's just move on. Here I am tracing one of the hinges, and the location of these three hinges relative to one another, meaning the distance between each hinge, is extremely important for me to get right here, because when I go to put this new slab onto the existing frame, if there is a slight misalignment, it is going to make my life so much harder than it needs to be. So I measured it not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. And even after doing all that care and measurement, I still had to whack one of the hinges with a hammer to get it aligned perfectly correct, but honestly it wasn't that big of a deal. The install itself wasn't that bad, and I was actually pretty happy with my work when I was done. I was surprised, you know, once again, I've never done this before, so I was just winging it and hoping for the best. This first hinge I did was pretty ugly, but the third one I did wound up being a lot cleaner. Obviously, the first time you do something is always going to be the worst time, so whatever. For some reason, I forgot to record me actually putting on the door, but here I am putting on the door sweep, and this thing is just, it just feels so cheap. I can't imagine it's going to last more than a month, to be honest. It's just super brittle plastic and foam on it, and I'm eventually going to get something better, but for now, I just want to see how much effect this is going to have on the sound anyway. And here is the rubber weather stripping that I'm going to put on all 3 corners of the door. This stuff is actually pretty easy to install. I'm actually going to wind up installing it on some of the other doors in my house just for extra weatherproofing. Okay, now for the before and after.
Well, I gotta be completely honest. I'm a little disappointed. This did not work nearly as good as I was intending. A big problem is this bottom door sweep. This thing is a piece of crap. It does not do anything, and if you see, if I drop the camera, you'll probably see a little bit of light underneath there. You can see towards the left there. The seals themselves that I put in the jam here, those worked pretty well. I didn't do a good job of filming me put it on. You can see in this part was I made it a little more thick than the rest of it because it was a little bigger of a gap. I put a different type of seal on here. And if I close the door, let's see, you shouldn't see too much light. You could see a little bit of light right there. And that's pretty much it from what I could tell. I don't think that's the main source of the sound. You know, that is a concern, but I mean, all things considering, I don't think that's really the problem there. I did some tests, and I have like a mix playing right now. Well, not the current second, but I was playing a mix before at like a moderate volume. Closing the door. So now the door's closed, and I was trying to imagine I was someone else in the home, you know, in the living room. So like right now, let's be quiet for a second. Let's see if we could hear it. So I don't know if that's picking up on camera, but it's low, but you could hear it. And let's say someone was reading a book down here, then yeah, it would be a problem. Now, I did a little test and I said, well, what happens when we're watching Gilmore Girls down here? And when I put this on, I mean, that completely drowns out this sound. So, you know, it's not perfect, but I think if someone's just... Alright, relax, Gilmore Girls. I think if someone's just living their life in the living room, it would be sufficient. I think what I'm going to wind up doing is they sell a mat that... Hold on, let me pause this song here. They sell a mat that once you close the door, you could hang with Velcro here. And it's a mat that has mass-loaded vinyl in it. And it should cover all the way, all over on, you know, all three sides of the door. And that should help. I think I'm going to buy one of those. We'll see. They're kind of expensive, so... It's like, is it really necessary? I don't know. Either way, a different door sweep certainly would help, because this thing isn't really doing much here, so we'll see. I don't know. For now, good enough. I'll keep mixing, see if my girlfriend complains. We'll go from there. Okay, so that door business was kind of boring, and I kind of failed. So let's talk about something more exciting. And what's more exciting than zeroing your VU meters? Now, if you remember in a previous episode, I was talking about the left and right channel VU meters being slightly off and me kind of tearing my hair out. And basically I went through even more tearing my hair out today. And I think I mostly fixed the problem. And it was actually easier than I thought to calibrate these meters. If you remember in a previous video, when I went to my storage unit to tear apart my old meter, or my old board rather, that I noticed that the resistors on the back of the VU meters are actually really easy to get to. So it's a little cramped right now, but if you look on the back here, there's two little dots. And that's probably as best as I'm going to be able to show you. But there's two variable resistors in there, so I just, you know, did some adjusting there, and it wasn't as simple as you would think. Let me go back to the front of the board and I'll explain how I did it. Okay, so how I calibrated this VU meters is not so straightforward. Initially, and in previous videos, I was trying to utilize the built-in tone oscillator on this unit. When you click this tone oscillator on, a tone gets sent to the group outs, as well as the stereo out, and as well as the aux outs. Now, ideally, in an ideal world, we could just use this tone oscillator that's on, and we could look at the master fader volume at the VU meters, and we should be able to, you know, basically balance the VU meters. Now, if you remember, it was off by like a half a dB, a dB. It depended on the time of the day, depended on what frequency I was using. It depended. There's no way of knowing for sure unless I get out a voltmeter and I go inside the board and I measure the audio levels going from this tone oscillator to the two channels, both left and right, to know if that tone oscillator is actually giving me an exact same level signal on each the left and right channel. So, because for all I know, it wasn't actually a problem with my VU meters, it was actually a problem with my tone oscillator. So, I did a little thinking. I said, okay, let me make sure that it's not the tone oscillator. Let me monitor some mono signals on these faders. And once again, I did this in a previous video, and I realized that just by plugging in my phone and using a tone generator, that when I sent signals directly to these channels, that even though I would have the pan perfectly on center, some of the channels were slightly off. I mean, we're talking about a half dB here. We're not talking about a lot. Nothing that would make a difference in a real mix. But they were off enough that I also did not trust whether or not it was the VU meters or the channels themselves. So once again, I didn't know what to do. So what I wound up doing was I sent a 1K tone signal to these group outs. I sent it to my Alesis HT24. I recorded about 30 seconds of that tone. And then I played back 8 versions of this mono signal, each channel centered on the left and right. And I was hoping that all of the variability within these channels should more or less average out. If I wanted to be even more accurate, I probably could have recorded all 24 channels, centered them And every little misalignment in each channel should have averaged itself out. And then I'll just show you what I did. Let's just play the signal. Let me turn that down because that is loud. Okay, so we are playing the tone through those 8 channels. The main mix bus is controlled here. And now I'm going to go to the meters and I'm going to adjust the fader so that both are about 0 VU. And you could see both of them are pretty much exactly on 0 VU. Maybe a cut hair off here and there, but I mean, that's as close as I'm happy with. And once again, all I did was just adjust the variable resistor on the back of this left VU meter. And it was really simple to do. Now, you'll notice, and excuse the tone in the background, I have no way to mute it, unfortunately. I actually have the speakers off, but the signal is so hot that it's actually still coming out of my speakers. But anyway, if you'll notice, as I raise the volume, that the right channel still shows the peak LED meter coming on first. Now, I'm going to try to show you. I mean, we're talking about a half a dB. It's better than it was. Before I calibrated that VU meter, it was a little worse, but we'll see if that bothers me. I don't even know if my old board was that bad either. Not really sure. I'm not going to worry about it. Good enough for now. Now, the reason I'm showing this, I know it's really boring, is that I wanted to talk about something here. And I made some changes before we get to what I actually want to talk about. I made some changes to this patch bay here. A couple things, actually. So let's go through it real quick. The first thing is, you'll notice that I have this patch bay here now. If you remember, I had that patch bay, and excuse me, this room is a mess right now. I've been doing a lot of tweaking. I was using it as the top patch bay there, and I was using the patch bay basically just to be a switch so I could disconnect the tape machine from the group outs, because if you remember, there's an impedance issue. If I have both the tape machine and the Alesis HG24 connected at the same time, this unit distorts for whatever reason. I don't know why, some impedance issue, yada, yada, yada. So I was using this with the built-in switches on top of it to basically disconnect the tape machine when I wanted to disconnect it from my group outs. I realized that I was kind of wasting this patch bay. I mean, it has 24 spots on it. It also has the ability, because of the switches on top, to choose between open, parallel, normalized, and half normal. So what I did was I took the patch bay that was here, I put it over there, and as a switch, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to plug in these little adapters into the bottom port. Now, when I plug it into the bottom port of that patch bay, since it's normalized, it's going to disconnect the top input from the bottom input of each channel. So it's essentially disconnecting my tape machine from my group outs when I plug those in. So now, instead of just using a switch, I'm just going to use these little adapters, and it works. So good enough for me. I'm happy with it. So that was the first thing. It was I moved this patch bay over here because this patch bay has 8 more channels than that one does. I also, actually, I'll just explain when I connected these two. Another benefit of this patch bay is that it's numbered already. You can see here. So I don't have to make stupid labels. You can see my labels up here are disgusting. I'm going to have to redo these because these dyno labels are falling off. I have some Sharpie here. You know, I'm going to make some nice labels once I get everything exactly how I want it. I've been making so many changes that I didn't want to do it yet, but you can see everything's numbered, so that makes everything a lot easier. So what I wound up doing was I connected channel 1 through 16 on my board, inserts here, my own inserts that I made from my Alesis HG24 to channel 17 to 20, I also connected here. I explained that in previous videos. And then you will also notice these 4 channels. Once again, I've stated in previous videos, I don't have the cables yet to connect the channels 21 to 24 from my Alesis HG24 to the board yet. I'm in no rush. 24 tracks, who's got time for that? So right now those are just placeholders, but I'm eventually going to connect those to the 24. So basically, this patch bay here is going to be the inserts for channels 1 through 24. Really convenient. And then the rest of the channels that I use as inputs, the 8, number 25 through 32, I have those inserts right here. Once again, those go to my input section of my board. So when I do my tracking, all my microphones, I'll be able to insert a compressor, some EQ, whatever I want to the signal. So that's awesome. So now basically every single channel on this board has an insert to it. This is an awesome functionality. I am so happy. I've already said it 20 other times in other videos. This is such a huge upgrade. The couple tests I've been doing this past week, just like mixing demos just for fun and trying new things, this functionality, oh my god, I'm going to be unstoppable. I'm really stepping up my workflow here to a great degree. The only place on the board where I'm not utilizing the inserts is my group outs. And I previously had all the inserts on my group outs when I first got my insert cables, but I just realized over time that I just kind of never used that functionality. It was much easier for me to have the inserts instead on the input section, and I'll tell you why. Let's say, for example, I'm doing an overdub session. I have one microphone. Usually I'm using my Shiny Box Ribbon microphone. I have it plugged into one preamp. There's two preamp here, the Sound Sculptor MP 5.66. I have that going to channel 8, and I would do all my overdubs with that same mic, that same preamp, and I would basically choose which track on my tape machine I wanted to record to, simply by pressing, you know, these group assigns, right? If I wanted track 6 rather, track 6, pan it to number 6, I'd set my level here. I would set my level here on the group fader going to the tape machine. I would record that track, and then say, all right, now I want to do track 7. It's going to be the second guitar track on the song. 7, boom, set my levels, set the levels, bam, I'm ready to record track 7. Now, because I put the inserts on the input section initially, I was able to keep a compressor in line when I was bouncing from different instrument to different instrument and doing my tracking. Versus when I had the insert cables on these, every single time I would jump from track 6 to track 7 to track 8, I would have to unplug my compressor and go to the other insert, basically for that channel. And I realized once again that it was just easier to have the inserts on the overdub. So once again, I just never used the inserts on these group outs. There's ways around it for me. I'm probably boring you guys. I know I talk a lot, but listen, that's what this series is for me to talk about all the little things. So whatever, stop complaining. Let's move on here. The other thing I did was, a couple other things. One of the other thing was I changed the location of my stereo inserts in my 2-track inserts. I didn't change the label yet, so I used to have the 2-track insert here and then the stereo insert here. And as I've stated 1,000 times before, I'm using this CL52E up here as my master bus compressor. So I almost always have this compressor connected to my stereo insert on my board. Okay, so basically this is what my setup was before I made the changes, and this annoyed me for a couple reasons. One, this is just kind of in the way. And when I have a bunch of cables here, right now there's nothing here, but usually there's 10,000 cables here with all my patch bay routings. It would just be in the way, right? And the second thing was, it was just kind of annoying to get to these jacks here, which at the time was my CG85E, as well as my DBX160X here. So whenever I had to connect to those compressors, it was just kind of annoying. So I moved the CL52E down here, and I swapped out the stereo with the 2-track inserts here. So now, it's a little off to the side. I mean, it's not completely clean. It would be better if I had shorter cables here. Maybe I'll buy, you know, shorter 3-inch cables here so it's less bulky, you know, not wrapped up. But anyway, it's a little cleaner this way. It's out of the way. Now I could get to my CG85E, my 160X very easily here, and it's not kind of annoying. The other thing I did was I put an insert for my aux 6, which goes to the dedicated channel 2 on my reverb, my spring reverb unit here. And I realized when I was doing all my kind of test mix downs and demos was that I'm probably going to want to have a compressor before my spring reverb a lot of the times. It's really useful for when you have tracks that have a lot of transient, say a percussion track, or even just a guitar solo track that has like a bam, 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 you know, really transient playing, you know, picky playing, you know what I'm trying to say. I don't know. The point is, it's really useful to be able to put a compressor before your spring reverb. And before, I had my aux 6 knobs directly from my board go straight to my unit, and I was unable to put the compressor between the two. So now I have this insert here so that in normal conditions, when I send my tracks to aux 6, it is going to bypass this patch bay and go straight to my reverb. And then when I'm putting reverb on tracks with a lot of transients, I can simply just patch in a compressor from this aux 6 to compressor, the out to compressor, back to here, and now that compressor will be in line with my spring reverb. So that was a great functionality that I added as well. Now, let's take a break here, talk about the patch, stop talking about the patch bay, and talk about this piece of gear right here. Now, if you're a loser and you watch my channel all the time, sorry to insult you, but let's be honest with ourselves, you might recognize this piece of gear from a video where I talked about buying gear for garage rock. And if you remember, I just went on Craigslist and just typed compressor, and this compressor came up. And at the time, it was on the website for $50. I got it for cheaper than that. I got it for $25 because I offered the guy $25, and he said yes. Now, my intentions initially was to get this and give it away in one of my videos. For $25, why not, right? Give this to someone else. I talk all the time how much I love this Ashley stuff. Now, this Ashley unit is slightly different than mine. This is the CLX52. I have the CL52E. Well, there's two here. So, it's a slightly different unit. It's a slightly updated unit, right? A little more modern. I would say this is probably mid-90s. This is probably early 2000s. I'm just guessing. I don't know. The point is, I wanted to give this out. However, I realized something. A great functionality of this compressor is that it has a threshold knob. And this is extremely useful for me when, or anyone, when you're using, well, just in general for compressors, but specifically when you're using a 2-channel compressor as a stereo bus compressor. And the reason for that is, let's forget this unit for a second, and let's talk about my regular unit that I have. Okay, so I have some music playing, and I'm just going to show you what the issue is instead of just explaining it, because it's going to make sense. So right now I have the fader, stereo bus fader, right about here, pretty close to 0 on the marking here. The meters are looking pretty good. I'm not peaking at all. Usually I push it a little harder to get some saturation. I usually have it, let's see, somewhere around there. Once again, you can see the right meter, the peak LED goes on first. But anyway, I digress. Somewhere around there, right? So let's go see on my master bus compressor how much compression I'm getting. Now I'm getting about 10 dB of compression right now, which is too much for my taste. It kind of takes the life out of the mix. I try to aim for maybe 3 to 4 dB, right? So let me get up close here. I usually try to get it, come on, focus. I usually try to get it somewhere around here. This is a little high for my taste. So in order for me to reduce the gain reduction, I could do two things. I could do the first thing, and the obvious thing, to lower the fader, right? So I'm going to lower the fader. All right, so I lowered it, right? Let's go back to my compressor. See, this is usually more where I like to have the meters on this compressor when I have using it as a master compressor. Not a lot. I'm not taking the life away of the mix, right? This is pretty much exactly where I want it. Now the problem is, if you remember a second ago, I was saying I like to have my mix on my master bus a little higher. I like to push it a little bit. I like to see those peak LED meters shining a little bit. I get a little saturation. It sounds good. It sounds a little better. It's a better signal to noise ratio on this machine, right? So by lowering this to get less gain reduction, I lowered the overall level. No big deal. Let's go back to my unit to remedy the issue. Okay, so we're back to my unit to remedy the issue. The only way to remedy the issue is by doing two things. I could either change the, I could either change the output for each channel or I could change the input. Now, this is really annoying when you're using a compressor like this that has 2 channels as a stereo bus compressor, because when you change one, it doesn't change the other, right? So let's increase the volume here to try to get the meters where I want it on my board. All right, so I'm only changing the left channel. All right, so I changed that. Let's go back to my meters. That's a little high. Let's just lower the fader a little bit. So this is more or less where I want it to be for the left channel, right? The left channel is looking good. You can see the peak LED meters just occasionally lighting. That's pretty much where I want it. Now the right channel, I have to go back and do the same thing. Now the problem is, and the reason I was explaining to you me balancing these VU meters, is that it's not easy to match this level, right? These aren't stepped potentiometers, right? It's a variable resistor, variable potentiometer, and I basically have to stop my mix, right? I'll have to stop my mix, stop mixing. I'll have to turn on my tone oscillator again, and then basically with my tone oscillator going on, that's how I'll have to make an adjustment. All right, let's go back. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now they're even, right? Then I have to turn off the tone oscillator, go back to mixing. Not the biggest deal, but it's kind of annoying when you're in the middle of a mix and you got to do that to make sure both your channels are level matched. Now, this is very easily fixed when you have a threshold knob. Let's set up this compressor, and I'll show it in action and tell you, and basically demonstrate why it's so useful. Okay, so this is set up within my master bus, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use the tone oscillator here to set my levels. Let me put this on the 0 VU. I know this is kind of boring, but right now I have to tweak the left channel a little bit. Let's go to my unit. Tweak it just a little bit. It's kind of hard to do all this on camera, so I apologize. Hold on, I have to turn off. Let me turn off the compressor. Let's go back. Not quite there. Let me keep tweaking. Okay, so that's pretty even, at least enough for this demonstration. So let's turn this tone oscillator off. Let's go back to the unit. So that initial setting of, balancing the 2 channels, when you have a threshold control, you should only have to do this once, right? I know now that both these channels are even. So let's engage the compressor function. Make sure the stereo tie is turned in. So when you have the stereo tie button depressed, both of these channels on this compressor are acting in unison, right? So when one channel is being triggered by this signal, it's automatically going to apply the same amount of gain reduction to the other channel, which is really useful because it allows you basically to set the threshold and ratio on one channel, and it will apply the same settings to the second channel. So let's take precedence on the left channel, just because it's channel 1, a little easy to remember. So we're going to set this ratio all the way down, and we're going to set this threshold all the way up. So this channel, because the threshold is all the way up, should never be triggering this stereo compressor, right? We're going to put precedence on this one, right? And let's just set a compression ratio of just maybe 3 for the master bus. That should be fine. We got slow attack, fast release, my usual settings. Now let's play the mix. We're going to use this threshold knob to control how much gain reduction we're having. Alright, so the mix is playing. I don't know if you could hear it in the background. It's pretty low. But we'll start with the threshold all the way up. So right now, both sides of the compressor are not engaging. And I'm going to slowly turn this around until it starts to engage. Right? So you can see the left side's engaging. If I keep going, you'll notice that both compressors, even though the threshold light here, the yellow LED is only lighting here, both sides are engaged with the compressor, or is, being compressed. Sorry, I'm doing a bad job of explaining this right now, but hopefully you get the idea. So the more I lower this, the more gain reduction I have, right? So for extreme example, if I put the threshold all the way down, we're getting a lot of gain reduction. Now, as I was stating before with this other unit, I like to have my compression on my master bus somewhere around there with these VCA units, right? So it's really easy to set with the threshold here. And I can play with the threshold knob all I want. It doesn't affect the balancing between the two channels volume-wise, right? Like I'm not touching the input or the outputs on each channel. I'm just using the threshold knob here to control how much gain reduction. So let's say, let's do two scenarios. Let's say I have it somewhere around there. I could go back to my board, and you can see right now the levels are way too high. So I could lower this, right? I'm lowering the master fader, and I could kind of get the levels where I want. Somewhere around there looks pretty good. Right? Now let's go back to the unit. Let's say, for whatever reason, I go crazy and I want almost like a limiting action. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. We're going to lower the threshold, right? So now we're really compressing the signal here. Now let's go back to my board. Now you can see my VU meters are pretty low. I'm not utilizing the signal to noise ratio of this control board as much as I could be. So let's raise the master fader. Okay, so here we go. Raising the volume. And probably about like right there is where I want. Right? So once again, I'm just demonstrating how I could use this stereo compressor and change how much gain reduction I'm having without having to change basically the input and output knobs. I hope I'm making sense, guys. I'm getting tired here. I'm just talking in circles. But I don't know. We did a lot of talking. We failed with the door. I don't know. But when it comes back to this compressor, I'm still not sure what I'm going to do. Because, one, I did want to give this out. This would be an awesome piece of gear to give out as a giveaway. I hope someone would make good use of it. The second thing is, I am emotionally attached to my CL52E, especially the first one, because that's the first piece of outboard gear I ever bought. And even the second one, I don't know. I know it's kind of stupid, but I just like the look of them a little better than these. Now the second consideration is, I had been thinking about getting a compressor that's actually meant to be a stereo bus. And like take for example, I've been looking at the Warm Audio bus comp, which is like, it's almost like a clone of the SSL kind of master bus compressor. And on that unit, there's basically only one set of controls, right? There's only one threshold knob, there's only one ratio knob, there's only etc., right? Each knob affects both the left and right channel equally. So it kind of makes the process much easier for you when you're changing settings, right? I don't know. That's going to cost me about $500 to get one of those used, so I have to think about it. I have to save up for it. We'll see. I might give this unit away. I feel like I should. I mean, come on, guys, right? I should give this son bitch away. It's pretty. It's still pretty, even though it's not as good as looking as my other ones. It's still a good-looking unit. Okay, we're ending this video. This is getting out of hand. Good night, guys.